Welcome to Backyard Science. My name is Marilyn. I work at the Marina branch at the Monterey County Free Libraries, and today is a sequel to last video's Bay Backyard. Last time we learned about the huge submarine canyon in Monterey Bay that creates an amazing deep sea habitat close to shore where researchers can easily study it. In this video, we'll learn how Monterey Canyon attracts all kinds of visitors, some from as far away as New Zealand and Indonesia, and how this migration works to create an interesting ecosystem in Monterey Bay. We learned in the last video that anytime you have irregularities in a habitat, it creates more space for different organisms to live. So imagine this piece of paper is the sea floor. There aren't that many places for organisms to live, right? If you were to punch through, maybe things could burrow, but that's about it. However, if you make a trough like our canyon, you can see that there are all kinds of crevices and places for things to live. The same happens if you were to imagine wadding up a piece of paper for a rock to place on it. So there are tons of places for creatures to hide in irregularities like this. How many new habitats do you see now? Of course, we can make little divots and things. This same principle works in the water column with currents. If a current is moving along with no obstruction in any or in only one direction, any organisms that are carried would spread out in it, and there wouldn't really be anything to gather them together. They would spread out in the water. Imagine a calm river with nothing in the middle of it. There isn't a lot of things that you can see that it traps or gathers. However, if you imagine an obstruction like a rock or an island or a certain submarine canyon, that causes an irregularity that captures and groups things. Think of a brook or a stream. You may have seen ripples in the water at the surface with nothing else on the surface causing that ripple, and that could be from a rock that's submerged or from maybe pebbles on the bottom that might create, or even from two branches of the river or stream coming together and converging, and you might have seen leaves captured there or other material or sticks. The same principle applies with our Monterey Canyon. And sometimes with different currents coming together in other parts of the ocean as well. Now, of course, in the ocean, the things that gather are not leaves, but plankton, which could range from tiny phyto and zooplankton, which are broadly plant and animal plankton, to mid-sized plankton like fingerling fish or small fish like sardines or anchovies, or even large animals like jellies, which are also considered plankton since they are stuck in the ocean's current. This convergence in Monterey Bay of the upwelling that brings up nutrient-rich water from the bottom with our deep canyon creates a kind of convergence of all these plankton and fish, and it creates a very big buffet for a lot of really cool animals to come and visit and eat. Now, before we get to meet our really cool ocean visitors, we have to learn about migration. Now, migration in the biological world is when animals seasonally move from one place to another. You might have heard about birds flying south for the winter for warmer weather. In Monterey, our canyon creates a big buffet of all kinds of things to attract animals that come from far away to eat. Our first visitor is probably the most famous, and they are the largest mammals on the planet, and they are whales. The most common are humpback and blue whales during this time of year in the summer, which you can sometimes see from shore by their big, the water spouting from their blowholes when they surface to breathe, although you mostly have to go a little bit further out into the bay to be able to see them using a boat. Now you can imagine if you are the biggest mammal on Earth, like the blue whale, which is roughly the size of 3 school buses stacked end to end, if you want to gulp and filter water filled with plankton, you would want that gulp to be as full of plankton as possible. So the convergence that happens above the Monterey Canyon is the perfect place to gather all these plankton so that when the blue whale or any other kind of baleen whale gulps around a plankton bloom and closes its mouth and filters the water out and keeps the critters, they get as many critters as possible. So that's why whales like to stop in Monterey Bay to feed on plankton, although some feed on small fish. And gray whales actually roll along the bottom, but they don't come during summer. A very special reptilian visitor is the largest species of sea turtle, and it's known as the leatherback sea turtle. Leatherback sea turtles are 6 to 7 feet long and can weigh anything from 550 to 1,500 pounds. Unlike other reptiles, they're actually able to regulate their own body temperature. They dive the deepest up to 4,200 feet, and they chomp on jellies on the way up from that deep dive. Now, how do you capture something as gelatinous as, well, a jelly from the water? If you are a leatherback sea turtle, you have these hard protrusions made of the protein keratin that is the same as in your fingernails and hair. These protrusions are called papillae. They face backwards in the turtle's throat, and they help to trap the jelly so that when the turtle comes up from the bottom and chomps the center of the jelly out and gulps it, it can't get back out and it's caught down in the turtle's stomach so that it can digest it. Rather than a hard shell like other sea turtles, these leatherback turtles have a combination of fat and skin on their backs over a lot of little tiny bones, which actually expand and contract as they dive because they go so deep. In the Pacific Ocean, these reptilian visitors migrate all the way from Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, and the Solomon Islands, where they breed on the beaches. They're critically endangered, unfortunately, from hunting, loss of habitat, predation by other animals, especially as hatchlings, ship strikes, and bycatch from fisheries. But steps are being taken around the globe to preserve their species. The last migratory visitor I want to talk about is avian, and it is the sooty shearwater. It's a gull-sized bird that is related to the albatross in the tube-nose family. They migrate all the way from New Zealand, where they raise one chick per pair in a burrow and colonies. Some travel to Japan, others travel to Alaska, and some come here to Monterey Bay. This round trip is up to 40,000 miles. These hardy birds barely land on this long trip because taking off and landing uses a lot of energy, but these sooty shearwaters lock their wings and glide on thermal wind currents to save energy. Sooty shearwaters are able to smell prey with these long noses. In Monterey Bay and other places, they feed on fish and squid. They can even dive up to 68 meters for food, but mostly they stay on the surface. In Monterey Bay, they congregate in huge clouds to feed before leaving around now in September and October to go back to New Zealand for the Southern Hemisphere summer breeding season. Well, that's all for this week's sequel to Last Time's Bay Backyard, but there are so many cool things to learn about the ocean and other visitors and residents here in Monterey Bay. You can check out the Monterey Bay Aquarium's website as well as the e-resources at our library website for more about migration and the ocean. If you missed these critters this year, don't worry, they'll be back for their migration to our Bay Buffet next year. I hope you had fun, I hope you learned something, and I will see you next week. Have fun exploring. Bye!